Hello friends, my name is Nick, and this week's plant of the week is Philodendron erubescens red emerald. This is, in my opinion, the quintessential climbing philodendron. If you are interested in growing philodendrons, aroids, climbing plants in general, you should grow this houseplant. I cannot recommend it anymore. This was definitely my first philodendron that I started branching out with to more interesting philodendrons, and I would consider this to be the perfect gateway philodendron to try out some more expensive collector philodendrons out there before you get too knee deep. This is a great place to start. First of all, it can be very inexpensive. I purchased a large plant already on a moss pole and it was like $30, $40 maximum. So this is definitely one of the more affordable out there philodendrons. And this does not stop growing. This is just a cutting I took recently off of the plant that I have in my bedroom on the trellis that has grown up to the ceiling and beyond, hence why I had to take a cutting of it. I did a whole video on propagating that if you are curious. But it just does not stop. In fact, I purchased this plant because a friend of mine was visiting. It doesn't really matter. But when she studied abroad in France, this plant, her host family had it growing, and she watched it literally grow up to the ceiling in a matter of months while she was staying there. So she had a sentimental attachment with this houseplant, so I figured, why not give it a go? And she was not kidding when she said she watched it grow up to the ceiling. This thing grows fast. So lighting for this, it's pretty easy to grow this. As you can see, this has some pretty deep green foliage. It doesn't require that much sunlight. So I'm growing this kind of off my east-facing window on my trellis, which is probably like 2 feet off of the east-facing window, kind of hidden from any of the harsh sunlight that comes in, receiving like a lick of it, but not any of like the harsh pounding beams of sunlight. And prior to that, in my old home, I was growing this just like up against a wall next to a window. So in a bright indirect lit area, but not receiving any direct sunlight by any means. So you can really just use the context clues here with the deep green foliage and the red tinge of the stems and the petioles that this does not require a lot of light. So definitely more a lower light philodendron in my own experience. And the watering has been very easy for this as well. If I do not water this enough, it will get a little droopy or kind of like curling around the edges, similar to like a Syndapsis pictus, so it is very vocal. But I do find myself watering this roughly like once a week. I just go ahead when I'm going around watering everything else with the watering can, I will go ahead and give these a drink, and I've never had an issue. If you are overwatering your Philodendron erubescens or Philodendron in general, you will likely have a couple of these lower leaves from the base turn yellow and fall off. So if you just have one leaf turning yellow at a time, it's probably natural. But if you're having like 2 or 3 from the base particularly turn yellow, it's probably not doing too well. And speaking of troubleshooting, if you're having like issues with the new growth, if the new growth is coming in like kind of small or tattered or yellow, perhaps give the houseplant a little bit more sunlight. Maybe you're giving it too little light and it's not able to grow to its fullest potential and photosynthesize the way that it wants. So just a place to start troubleshooting there. The soil, I'm using just a standard aroid mixture, coconut coir-based soil or a peat moss-based mix that I've added some perlite or pumice to, volcanic rock, and some orchid bark. I prefer finer orchid bark, but you can use thicker orchid bark, it's totally fine. And sometimes I add some charcoal if I'm feeling it. But I would consider the perlite and the orchid bark to be essential for growing your aroids the way that they would like to grow. Humidity, these prefer to be around like 60% humidity, which is perfectly fine in like the spring and summer months. You won't have an issue, but you would perhaps consider supplementing some humidity in the winter months. I don't, I'll admit it, it's been totally fine for me, but if you would like to be the very best plant parent that you can be, I would use a humidifier in the fall and winter months when your heat kicks on and it starts drying out your home. Your philodendron won't love it, but I've had mine growing with me for like 3 years now, so it's acclimated to the setting that I have in my home and it seems to be doing fine. So if you're just getting started, I would definitely be more mindful, especially if you just brought this home in the winter time, perhaps go ahead and supplement some humidity. But if it's been a couple years, you're probably fine. These can withstand a wide range of temperature. They'll do fine from like 50 degrees to 90 degrees. I wouldn't let them hang out in 50 degrees that long, but they'll be fine. Same with 90 degrees. I'm sure they won't love being like super hot, but if you're within that ballpark, which I feel confident that your home is, you're gonna do totally fine. Toxicity, these are moderately toxic, as all philodendrons are, so would your pets nibbling on this plant warrant a vet visit? I would say not, but their mouth might swell a little bit. Maybe they'll throw up a little bit of leaves, but just keep an eye on them. They'll probably be okay, but I've never had an issue with my old roommate's cat nibbling on a philodendron a couple of times. The worst that happened was he would just throw up the leaf material that he ate. I'm sure his mouth also was a little tingly from the oxalates. They're basically like microscopic glass shards that are in the sap of these leaves. That is basically why you don't want your pets chewing on it, because it's not good, obviously. Propagating, I did mention, I did a video on propagating this, so you can check that out if you're curious, but it's simply just taking stem cuttings, taking a cutting in between two nodes. A node is where a leaf emerges from the stem, and there's going to be all these little root nublets that will be eager to grow roots if you put them in water or soil. And fertilizing, you can just use a standard houseplant fertilizer, as always, the recommended amount cut in half. And you can use that in the spring and summer months, just once a month during the growing season. And you will have a very vigorous growing plant, but I haven't been really that keen on fertilizing my Philodendron erubescens, and it's still grown up to my ceiling. So this plant has a will to grow. So one I highly recommend. It's very rewarding to grow for how fast it grows and just how robust it is. And it just has such a huge impact on my home. My home would not be the same without my Philodendron erubescens red emerald. So it's absolutely a houseplant I will be growing till the day I die. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. If you don't already, you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at phillyfoliage. You can subscribe to my Patreon for even more houseplant content. I would really appreciate it. And you can subscribe to my channel. Thank you guys so much for joining. I'll see you guys in my next video. Have a great day.